What's up guys, River and Allison here with the daily vlogging channel Riv and Al. Today we have a little bit different video for you. Today we wanted to go through the different kind of transportation in the city of Chicago.
Transportation is a topic that we definitely wanted to cover because it is one of the things that Chicago is known for, having a great transportation system. And it's super helpful when you actually get here to know how to get around and maneuver around the city without like having to drive or
spend too much money.
Yeah.
The outcome of today's video, what you will walk away with is knowing all of your options for getting to any place in the city and surrounding areas and what to expect in the form of cost. First system that we want to talk about is the elaborate bus and L system. So L is what we call our elevated train. So if you've ever seen any of those iconic photos of Chicago where the train goes around our downtown area on kind of a platform, that's the L. In our opinion, our system is probably one of the easier to comprehend in Chicago versus any other major US city. New York has an elaborate system of subways in the forms of trains, but they're lettered, they're numbered, they're all kinds of weird things. Our system, all it is just color-coded trains.
And our bus numbers are actually kind of in order, starting from lowest and going higher. So it makes it super easy that the train is colors and the buses are numbers.
Always.
Makes it very easy to remember.
There are hundreds of different bus lines. There are like a dozen different train lines. There's blue line, red line, green line, purple line, pink line, orange line, yellow, purple, all kinds of lines. We'll actually throw a map of the whole train system right over us right now. As you can see, there's a ton of them. So let's talk about the fare structure. So for all buses in the city of Chicago, it's gonna cost you about $2 to ride that bus every single fare. For the trains, it's gonna cost you about $2.25. So that's fairly efficient when you compare it to some of the other types of transportation that we're gonna talk about here in a little bit. So an extra thing in addition to those prices is sometimes you have to do what's called transfer, which goes from one train to another or one bus to another, and they don't charge you a whole extra fare for that. It's normally about a quarter more, which is kind of cool. There's all kinds of ways that you can buy passes for the CTA. So the CTA is the Chicago Transit Authority, which governs all of the trains and all the buses in the city. You can do a pay-as-you-go, which is actually really cool. So if you wanted to get on a bus, you don't need to have a bus pass at all. You can pay with cash, you can pay with what we call the Ventra card, which is our cards, the bus pass, or you can even do a pay-as-you-go with any bank-issued cards or Apple Pay, Android Pay, anything that has that little kind of like Wi-Fi symbol on your card. You can tap that on the bus pass and it will charge you the $2.25 or the $2 to take the fare. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
You can use Apple Pay. You learn something new every day.
Yeah.
You also can get day passes. So they come in the form of 1, 3, I'm looking at a cheat sheet. They come in 1, 3, 7, and 30-day passes that are priced kind of accordingly. People that live in the city sometimes buy these 30-day passes and that's how they get along. But if you're coming for like a week, it could be fairly efficient. For example, a 7-day pass costs $28 per person, and that's for an adult. If you have students that are with you that have a valid student ID, or there are some people that qualify for reduced pricing that we'll talk about here in a second, you can get those really cheap. So $28 for a cab to take you across town, sometimes it's almost that much. So I mentioned there's some reduced pricing available. And like I said, first that's for students. Students can get reduced pricing that is much, much cheaper, kind of a third of what the regular pricing is depending on what you're gonna buy. There's also reduced pricing for senior citizens. So again, if you just show your valid ID, you can get that reduced pricing. Reduced pricing is also available for people on Medicaid and also with disabilities. The CTA is very accommodating to anyone who needs to have any type of aid, whether that's in the form of ramps that can come down for people that need wheelchair accessible buses. They also do that for the train platforms and are very good about elevators and things like that. It's universally accessible. But on top of reduced pricing, there's also free rides available. People with some forms of disabilities can qualify for a free ride, and also if you have a valid active duty military ID, you can ride all of the Chicago Transit Authority buses and train L systems totally for free. All you have to do is present your military ID to the bus driver, to the train conductor at the station, and they will let you in totally for free. The last thing we'll talk about with the buses and trains is kind of getting around the city. There are 2 major airports in Chicago, both of which are connected with trains.
So if you're flying into either airport in Chicago, either O'Hare or Midway, there are actually train lines that go directly from the airport to downtown Chicago. For O'Hare, it's the blue line. The blue line will take you, it picks you up directly in the airport and will take you straight downtown. And for Midway, it is the orange line, which will do the same thing. And at the airports, you can actually buy your Venture card. So if you're flying into Chicago and then hoping to use and utilize our train system, then you can actually get your Venture cards there. And actually, you can get a Venture card at any train L station. We kind of interchange train and L. Any L station in the city.
Pretty much all major train stations are gonna have what looks kind of like a vending machine of these cards that will spit out exactly the value that you decide to put on that. If you get a card, a Venture card, you can actually download the Venture app. I'll leave a link in the description below, and you can add fares to your card and just kind of keep going. The next thing we're gonna talk about is Uber and Lyft. We know there's a lot of rideshare programs, but we're just gonna talk about these 2. The city of Chicago is one of the best, most outfitted for Uber and Lyft in the whole country. Uber and Lyft can pick up at the airport in Chicago, and also you can hail cabs and use cabs at the metered rate via the Uber and Lyft's apps. This is super convenient for in the winter months if you don't want to go wait outside for a cab, or if you're just trying to get a car to go from here to there. Obviously, our advice would be to utilize UberX. If that makes you uncomfortable, given that they're not professional drivers like cab drivers, you can use things like, what's it called, Uber Select or Uber XL, which are kind of the luxury that you pay a premium for, or like I said, you can use it for the Uber cabs that does have a professional vetted driver that will drive you around. These are, obviously a little bit more pricey than taking the L. A disadvantage to taking the L in the bus service is you obviously are held to the schedule of the train or bus line, while the Uber or Lyft are actually just at your demand, and obviously a bit more private if you want to just be in a car by yourself. To give you a comparison, to take the train from Chicago O'Hare International Airport into the city, it will cost you about $2.25. If you were to take the same trip with a cab, it will cost you anywhere between $40 and $50 to take into the city from the airport. So you can see that there's a pretty big price difference that just taking a cab versus the train, and honestly, it takes about the same amount of time to get here.
Yeah, when it comes to traffic, you can be backed up, and sometimes it'll even take longer than the train, or sometimes there's not a ton of traffic when you might be coming in from the airport, and it'd be about the same time, maybe a little less depending on where you're going.
So that brings us to our next point, which are cabs or taxis, however you'd like to call them. They're everywhere in Chicago. We have dozens of cab companies that have the cabs roaming all sorts of streets. Any real major street in Chicago, you're gonna be able to hail a cab, especially if you stand there long enough. Now, obviously there are all kinds of apps that can talk about different cabs and hailing and where to find them, but any of those services, they're gonna have a metered rate. There are kind of some stipulations in terms of if you have extra people or baggage, they'll obviously charge up. They have additional fees for that. It's all on the meter, which will come out in the receipt. It's super nice. All of our cab drivers are professionally vetted. If it's a reputable cab service in Chicago, they obviously are licensed and things like that, which is kind of nice. Sometimes Allison and I take cabs just because we know that. It's a professional driver. He knows, or he or she knows exactly where they're going, while someone who drives maybe an UberX might not actually know where you're going and has to be reliant on GPS or things like that. Again, like Uber, it is much more expensive than the L in the bus system, but again, it is private and they'll get you exactly where you need to go.
So another option that we have for traveling into and out of the city is through the metro trains. So these actually can connect you from the suburbs into Chicago, the Chicago suburbs into Chicago, or even they can go up into Michigan.
Almost to Michigan.
Almost to Michigan.
To South Bend, Indiana. That's the South Shore commuter train. And most of these trains are pretty affordable for one-way tickets. So some people look to take the Amtrak train, which is obviously a cross-country train, potentially. I am from Michigan, as some of you guys know, and I used to have people sometimes bring me to South Bend, and it cost $11 to come all the way into the city one way, which is super nice. But there's actually 11 different train lines that kind of sprawl out across the Chicagoland area. Some that go almost all the way up into Wisconsin, into Indiana, that sprawl out and let you come into the city. So if you have friends or family that want to you want to see when you're here in Chicago, or they want to come in to see you when you're in the city, you can definitely do that, and you don't need a car. Allison and I haven't owned a car in years.
I've never owned a car.
Well, you've never owned a car.
I've never owned a car.
But I owned a car when I first moved here, and after about a year, it just made no sense. So if you're gonna move here, save the money, don't bring the car. We have such an awesome infrastructure, and if you do need a car to drive wherever, rent one. That's what we do. The metro ranges in pricing depending on where you're going and depending on what line you're taking. Some of the more popular lines are a little bit more expensive for obvious reasons, supply and demand. You can get out to pretty much anywhere. The longest the train lines go out, I mean, where we had our wedding, if you guys saw that, there's a train station right near there, and to drive there took like almost an hour and a half to get there. The trains go way out. And
for the metro trains, you can either buy your ticket while you're on the train. A conductor will come through and check everyone's ticket, and you can either buy your ticket there, or you can get it in advance at the train station, or you can actually pay for it on your phone through the Ventra app. You can already have your ticket ready to go through that Ventra app, which is really, really nice. So you can use cash on the train, or if you need to hook up your card onto your phone, to use the Ventra app to buy the ticket. Unfortunately, they do not accept credit cards on the trains themselves. Yes, very important to note.
The last thing that we wanted to acknowledge on our transportation video here, guys, is driving. Yes, of course you can drive into the city. Yes, Chicago traffic is horrible. It is a big city, there are millions of people that live here, and parking is very, very expensive downtown. Be sure to note that. So if you are driving into town, be sure to account for that in your travel plans, in your travel budget. Some hotels do offer complimentary parking, but a lot of times it is coming at the cost of like $70 or more for maybe a day or two. Depending on where you're parking, depending on where you're staying, that could be a big, big challenge. That's not to say that there are not some free parking. For instance, when we lived up in Lincoln Park, if you could find parking on the street, it was free on some streets. But I will say, big disclaimer, that is definitely not the case with all streets, and it's normally only on the weekends. If you park on the street during the week, you will need to have at least a permit, or you may get towed.
If you're coming to the city, I would look into an app like Spot Hero, or another app that's equivalent, and it can help you kind of try and find and evaluate different parking options in the city.
So there's our suggestions, guys. All of the information that leads to you having a fun, safe trip in Chicago and being able to get around for as cheap as possible, or at least whatever makes most sense for you and your friends or family. So please, if you have any questions whatsoever, leave a comment in the comment section below. We will do our absolute best to get back with you as soon as we can and answer your questions. Heck, if some of you have really, really good questions that are way out there and don't answer in this video, we might make another video in terms of how to answer your question about how to get around in the city. So thanks for sticking with us, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up. It helps out our channel, and be sure to share this video with anyone that you know that might be interested in coming to Chicago, or is going to be coming to Chicago, moving to Chicago. This is relevant for everyone. We are not sponsored by the city of Chicago. We wish we were. But if you do have a trip in mind coming up, do consider Chicago, Illinois. There is so much to see here, so many good things despite bad news or things like that. It is a safe city where there's lots of good things going on. So be sure, like I said, to give this video a thumbs up. If you're just seeing this video now, be sure to subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow with our daily videos that come out on our daily vlogging channel right here. Bye, guys.